Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Marissa Hollywood, and I'm the Associate Director at the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center, located on the campus of Queensborough Community College, a part of the City University of New York. Our mission is to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate current and future generations about the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. We're excited to welcome you to today's program, Cultural Landscapes of Confinement, Strengthening Vulnerable Refugee Communities at the Syrian-Turkish Border, featuring composers Saba Aminikia and Alexandra Vorebilov. The Kupferberg Holocaust Center in Bayside, New York, is situated on the traditional land of the Matinecock people who continue to live here today. We offer gratitude and respect to all of the indigenous people of Turtle Island, past, present, and future, including the Lenape and Shinnecock peoples. What I just read is what we call a land acknowledgement. This is a statement recognizing that the land we all occupy in the course of our daily lives, including our schools, jobs, parks, and homes, as well as the names of towns and roads, were first inhabited by another group of people who were forcibly expelled and murdered. Today, we identify those crimes for what they are: mass atrocities and genocide. These horrors continue to have devastating political, social, psychological, and economic impacts upon and within Native American and Indigenous communities. Today's event is part of the KHC's 2021-2022 National Endowment for the Humanities Colloquium entitled Incarceration, Transformation, and Paths to Liberation During the Holocaust and Beyond. The event is organized by the KHC in partnership with the Queensborough Performing Arts Center, QPAC, at Queensborough Community College, and is co-sponsored by the Holocaust Genocide and Interfaith Education Center at Manhattan College, the Ray Walpole Institute at Western Washington University, the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights at Rutgers University, and the Department of Music at Queensborough Community College. Today's program will feature opening remarks by Dr. Azeda Alai regarding the current state of the global refugee crisis, and a conversation facilitated by Dr. Mirna Lechik with our guest speakers, composer Saba Aminikia and Alexandra Vorebilov. They will discuss their involvement with the Flying Carpet Children's Festival, an annual arts festival founded and directed by Aminikia that takes place each summer along the Syrian-Turkish border. In an environment of intense stress where youth face a magnitude of challenges, Aminikia, Vorebilov, and an international team of volunteer artists work together to bring inclusive, safe, and engaging educational and cultural activities that aid in directing expressions of trauma and in navigating the perils of a transitional state of belonging. Before we begin the program, please note that the chat has been disabled. Submit any questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our first speaker today is Dr. Azeda Alai. Dr. Alai is an associate professor of psychology at Queensborough Community College. Her research interests currently focus on the Holocaust education and psychology of bystander behavior during the Holocaust. Her past research has focused on the intersection of media, mass violence, warfare, and genocide. She is the author of Understanding Aggression: Psychological Origins and Approaches to Aggressive Behavior. She was the scholar in residence for the KHC's 2017 NEH Colloquium, and she is one of the faculty fellows for this year's NEH Colloquium, along with Dr. Lechik, who we will hear from later in the program. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Azeda Alai.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So we are presently experiencing the worst humanitarian crisis regarding displacement, even surpassing the one that existed in the aftermath of the Second World War. According to the UN Refugee Agency, 84 million people have been forcibly displaced worldwide as a result of persecution, conflict, violence, or human rights violation. This calculates to at least 1 out of every 108 persons on the globe has been forcibly displaced. And despite how staggering these numbers are, they are likely underestimates. Additionally, the global pandemic has amplified this ongoing crisis as people in displaced communities, such as refugee camps, are at risk for contracting and spreading the virus. As is often the case during catastrophic events, the most vulnerable, such as women and girls, are at even greater risk. Indeed, forced displacement disproportionately impacts women and girls, as does the pandemic. Girls have more difficulties accessing education, even in the best of circumstances. And one of the many negative repercussions of displacement is lack of access to even basic education for children. The top refugee hosting countries right now are currently Turkey, Pakistan, Uganda, and the Sudan. All countries who struggle to provide opportunities for their own citizens and who will likely not prioritize refugee women. So, when we look at the number and try to understand the scope and scale of the problem, it's hard not to be overwhelmed by such dire statistics. And I find myself asking the question of how can we maintain our hope or maintain our spirit under such instability and with seeming global indifference? The potential for persistent trauma under such circumstances begs the question of pathway towards healing, particularly for children living in these conditions. There's also the question of how long, if ever, it takes for a displaced person or family to find a home and become settled again. These persistent threats that individuals under these experiences have can trigger many survival-based responses, not allowing for the space or stillness to work through the intensity of emotions and feelings in a deeper way. I find myself returning to the oft-noted clinical phrase, all trauma is pre-verbal. This is where the power of music and the arts as a pathway to healing intersects with a crisis such as this one. The ability to adapt is critical in such high stakes conditions. The transformation that is triggered by being displaced similarly requires such fluidity. The necessity for music in healing as a daily reminder of hope, as a way to build community and bridges between people, cannot be overstated. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Marissa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lai, for helping to put today's conversation into context. It's clear that this is an important and relevant topic. And for those of us who are educators, particularly those who work with a diverse student population, such as can be found here at Queensborough, we know that when teaching about the Holocaust, genocide, and human rights atrocities, it's vital for us to recognize the signs of trauma that our students might experience, trauma due to absorbing the content, as well as trauma experienced within their own lives, and to think about ways to incorporate the arts as a means to safely and comprehensively explore this dark history. I'm eager to learn more about the Flying Carpets Children's Festival and how they're using music to navigate trauma and spark creativity. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Saba Aminikia is a San Francisco-based composer, musically exploring the dichotomy of light and dark. Trained classically and influenced globally, Aminikia's work has been widely performed around the world and commissioned by theater troupes, contemporary classical ensembles, film scores, Persian traditional music groups, as well as jazz bands, including the Kronos Quartet, Brooklyn Youth Chorus, Symphony Parnassus, San Francisco Conservatory of Music's New Music Ensemble, Mobius Trio, Delhi Trio, and Living Earth Show. In addition to being the artistic director for Flying Carpet Festival, he serves as the musical director for Sirkane, a nonprofit organization based in Mardin, southern Turkey, which serves around 400,000 children through circus arts and music. Alexandra Barabalov's 90 works, ranging from concert music and opera to music for dance and experimental film, have been performed by the Kronos Quartet, Serbian National Theatre, English National Ballet, Rambert Dance, Ethel, Moravian Philharmonic, Belgrade Philharmonic, and Providence Festival Ballet, among others. Her recent work includes commissions from the Cleveland Museum of Art's Kronos Quartet and the Glimmerglass Festival. Between 2007 and 2011, Barabalov led Summer in Sombor, Serbia, a week-long workshop for composers with the South Oxford Six Composers Collective that she co-founded in 2002 in New York City. The workshop facilitated the creation of over 50 works. Her works are available on Orange Mountain Music, Nonesuch, Cantaloupe, Innova, Centaur Records, Vienna Modern Masters, and Bright Shiny Things labels, as well as Icarus Films. And finally, Dr. Mirna Lechik is a faculty fellow for this year's NEH Colloquium and an assistant professor of music at Queensborough Community College. A pianist, she is active as a recitalist and chamber musician, performing a wide range of repertoire that reflects her interest in intercultural music, historical performance, practice, and contemporary works. Myrna's recent publications include 2 critically acclaimed recordings, a debut solo album entitled Mass, and Eastern Currents, a disc of contemporary chamber music. And in 2018, she was honored with the CUNY Academy Henry Wasser Award for Outstanding Assistant Professors. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Marissa. A warm welcome to our guests and to our international audience. We have Alexandra Vrebelov, who is joining us from Novi Sad in Serbia, and Sahba Aminikia from San Francisco. They have done some important work as composers and educators, and have found through this festival a meaningful and impactful way of combining artistic and social work. So I thought it would be a good idea to begin with a short video introduction to the festival and then continue our conversation after that. So Sahba, since you're the director and founder of this festival, I thought I would start by asking you how you came about starting this festival and what it offers to both the communities it serves and the participating artists.
Of course. Hello, everyone. So the creation of the festival was a very organic and natural response that to what was happening in the United States back in 2017. And that's the initiation, basically. I wanted to be useful and I wanted to be impactful. And for many reasons, my life as a composer here is very fulfilling, but for many reasons it's not also at the same time, because in the genre that we are involved in, musicians are mostly concentrated on the art and the details of the craft to some extent that it gets a little bit distance from the reality and the middle class that we specifically target in this festival. And that's something that is true not about only music, about everything, about economy, about everything, that this large group of people have been left out of the equation. And in this situation, I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be of some use, basically, in the beginning. And it started with me actually realizing that there is an organization already active in Mardin, which is in southeast of Turkey. And it's a circus school, and it's been active since before the Syrian war actually started. But they had many projects involved with the Syrians working in refugee camps. And now that the refugee camps do not exist in Turkey, they work with children who are resettled in that area. And obviously the fact that our friend Azadeh mentioned, also the fact that we are facing a global human crisis right now. And in terms of Syria, more than half of the country have left the country. And out of that large number, which is 20 million people, actually, there are 4 million people living in Syria, living in Turkey, actually, they're resettled in Turkey, out of which 2 million are children, actually. And the way the politics of Middle East has an impact on our life here, it's immense, actually. Starting for terrorism and continuing on, because every war that America was engaged in, it was at least the justification was for terrorism. And the fact is that this process that we are involved in wars all around the world, actually produces more violent people than actually fixing the problem. So now we are thinking that the Syrian war is over, ISIS has been defeated in Syria, and the fact is that there are not many militants left, but we are in fact actually with this involvement in Syrian war, we have created millions of violent people actually that they're potentially violent for the future. And this includes a large number of children who have learned nothing but violence and vengeance, and parents or family members or friends who have been parents and family members who have been killed in this war or have been kidnapped. So imagine when you are a 10-year-old child, 15-year-old child, and your sister and mother has been kidnapped by the ISIS or killed. The only sense in you, strong sense, is the vengeance and violence. And political powers in the world were abusing this feeling inside these young soldiers, and they would recruit them to actually fight for different sides. And these are the details of the Syrian war that we are not really aware of. So it's an ongoing process, and the problem is still there, and there is going to be more problem in the future. I thought that as musicians, we are in fact functioning as the spiritual leaders, that we can have an impact on the situation, and there is a need for it. As a composer here, I love what I'm doing, but in fact, I'm doing something that 6,000 other people are doing, but this is something that I could be involved in where there is a huge need. And throughout my career, I was always identifying this need, actually, where I can be more useful, in fact, because I came from a refugee background myself. So this was the basically initiation of the festival.
Thank you, Sahba. And Alexandra, how did you become involved, and to what extent has this affected your work as a composer and educator?
Well, I was very lucky that Sahba and I are friends. And when he started the festival, when he joined the organization, started the festival, he told me about it. And similar to what he describes about his feeling of being really needed or used in our Western culture with the kind of music that we're making, it's just, especially in recent years where there is so much drama happening. And as a musician, you very often feel, especially being a classical musician, so remote from the impact that people who work with words, for example, can make, or in arts that are more concrete. For musicians, classical musicians, it's really difficult to contribute, or it feels so, to contribute in ways that are meaningful. So I was ready for that kind of involvement in a very personal way. And also, it didn't matter to me that I'm not going there really as a composer. Everything in my career that I've done in our Western culture, in a way, it did not matter. It brought the artistic integrity, but to those children, it's really not important. You show up there as a human being, and you share your humanness, and they share their humanness. And this is the kind of impact where our art, as our background, stands there as something that we radiate, but it's not really about performance necessarily, or the excellence or the detailed work, as Saba mentioned. It's about the human connection and how to contribute in ways that are beyond the details of our profession, that sometimes is just so important in the West.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you see there on the ground, and what greets you when you arrive, what the days are like during the festival?
It's difficult to describe because I usually go there a couple of months earlier, or at least a month, to prepare for the arrival of the artist. And I'm involved with a lot of logistics and a lot of planning and a lot of problems that I don't want the artist even be involved in, because the area that we are in is a very politically sensitive area. And it's not just because of the refugees, it's always been a Kurdish area. And there's always ongoing struggle between the Kurdish militants there and the government, the central government. And imagine 4 million refugees have arrived in this region as well. But when it comes to the festival, I personally look forward to the time of the festival, and then people come in because there's always fresh minds coming, and we can always create something interesting together, and that creation is the most fulfilling feeling that I've ever experienced in music as a whole. But my normal days when I'm there at the centers, I go to centers and I interact with children. The first thing you will encounter is 50 to 100 children coming and hugging you when you arrive. So that is the first observation. And after that, it's all about human connection. I personally went through a process to understand this, but and every year I feel there is part of me that has been almost cut from me, and there is a sense of renewal that every year I feel that I'm becoming a different person, and the festival is shaping me to something else. But Mardin is a very ancient city. It's a 1,500-year-old city, and it's entirely made out of stone on top of a mountain. And it's surrounded by other cities that are portable units they also travel to, and we have centers in other cities as well. So there are lots of issues that you encounter with just what first glance when you arrive, you would immediately realize that this is a society that lacks certain infrastructure, resources, access to culture, access to education. But at the same time, it's a very lively society. People have a strong sense of survival. And that actually what brings, I think, hope and, this energy into the city that I'm also thirsty for. I always travel there earlier to stay there for a while. And so it's difficult to say that what kind of environment we are there, because when I come back to this States, that this is the time that I'm struggling the most actually until I go back. In societies that people are struggling to survive, there is a strong energy of life, and that That is an incredible energy that when you go to, for example, if you're in the US and you go to rural areas or go to the suburbs, you feel that how this repetitiveness in people's lives has brought other issues into the society that doesn't exist in any part of the world. But when you are in these societies that supposedly are dangerous, supposedly are near the border, they're sensitive, I personally feel very safe. I personally feel very loved, and so you are noticed as a human, and that is something rare for me coming from the United States. So this is my first encounter with the city.
Alexandra, would you like to add your impressions?
Well, yes, I was less familiar with the place in Sabah because he spent there much longer time than I did. But I was there 3 times, and the most difficult thing, just in terms of the physicality of all of it, is that it is a difficult. It's 100 degrees Fahrenheit and above in the summer when we're there. So just if everything else would be fine and children would be safe and happy and living with their parents, operating outdoors when there is 100 degrees Fahrenheit and there is no protection would be difficult. So just by being active for 12 or 14 hours a day, when we travel and spend time with children and in the villages, just the sheer existence in those natural environments is really difficult. And then you start just the layer after layer, it gets deeper and deeper, how the lives of those children are affected by everything. The fact that sometimes you see children who have, you see the physical marks of violence on their bodies. You know that their parents, mostly their mothers are with them. Fathers are usually, at least men are not around. The children 5 or 6 years old carry the toddlers. So there is a lot of emotional processing that happens for us who arrived. But then the other side is what Saba said. There is so much love, and there is so much resilience, and so much positivity and joy when they just can be children and engage in things that are positive and creative rather than thinking about the war and loss. This for me made it not worthwhile, but my life experience up to that point and after that, I see everything through the prism of what it means to live in really difficult conditions, on both natural and social, in both aspects of existence and surviving and going on. It's very difficult to look at the Western world with the same eyes and to create art with the same kind of approach after experiencing that. And I hope we'll talk a little bit about children, how what we exchange with them, because we talked about us and how it impacts us, but there's that huge part of sharing that happens also.
Yes, the children you mentioned have no access to education. They're not in school. Is that correct? Or
a large number of them are not, due to the fact that many of them come to Turkey without speaking the language Turkish, and they're Arab-speaking children. And in the beginning, there were Arabic-speaking schools actually in that area, but there was some political tension that a lot of them have closed down. They've been shut down by the government, and now about 65% of children they have no access to formal education. There are a lot of dropouts, actually mostly among men, because Azadeh mentioned about education, specifically the situation with education is in fact worse for men than for women, because the women are expected to stay in a calm environment and be mothers and really and study. That is not but men have to go to work and start making money much earlier than that. So a lot of the boys that we work with, it's really difficult to establish any sort of consistency with them because they're all working in construction, in very difficult jobs actually. Child labor is a huge issue. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, that is it's part of the culture. But also the conservative culture that exists in southeast of Turkey, which is very different from other parts of Turkey, that has affected children's lives as well, mostly women, mostly girls. So there are tons of issues that they're dealing with, and the organization that we work with, they have social workers that are consistently working with us, and they're observing. So everywhere we perform, everywhere we go, they are there to observe and take note of the problems that exist in every region. So we always try to target and reach out for the most communities that have the most need. Actually, that is what we are trying to do. There is definitely a limit to what we can do. We cannot go to the same place sometimes twice, but that really breaks my heart sometimes. But the reality is that exposing children of this age to beauty, symmetry, and artistic integrity, no matter in what condition, because mostly we perform on the streets actually. There are many cities in that area that they do not have a public arena, public place that we can go, any venue. So, we go to a village and we have to perform at their funeral house because that's the only public building in that entire village. But I strongly believe, because as I grew up in Iran, and I grew up in a very authoritarian society during the 80s after the revolution, and Iran was completely banning the Western products, music, films, and I personally grew up in Iran watching classic movies, for example, from the United States. That when I came here, actually, when I immigrated to the US, I realized that most of my American friends have never watched these movies actually. So imagine just staying in a situation that you don't have access to certain cultural phenomena, and being able to have this tiny window that you would look at it. This would create a sense of example of how you can be and what you can be in the future. I strongly believe in that. Inspiring the children is everything. There is one thing to be next to them, play with them, and be a friend, but there is another thing to appear, be magical, have a strong sense of beauty and identity, and sometimes contrary to what they imagine. For example, I myself, I'm always very, very long earrings, all sort of ornamentation, and in that area, I can tell you, as a man, it's very different. When the children do not expect a man to dress this way. And all this, that the weirdness and wonders that we bring to them is part of the message of the festival, that we expose them to something individually, to something that it's much beyond their society and community. And we create a platform also to change this artist, to bring more artists, to bring even stranger people, with stranger ideas, and that inspiration is, I think, what I can do in my lifetime in the context of this festival. One thing about this whole process and creating this festival is the more you examine, the more you realize that how small we are towards the largeness of this human crisis that is happening. And then you start to control your ego and start with the things that you can do, it can accomplish, and build on top of that, basically. So I think this process of inspiring is maybe the most important, because when I think of my own classic education in Iran, I didn't learn much from it, but I learned a lot from amazing musicians that I met along the way, even one time, So I think that might be something that we are going after here.
Yes, I think that's what Alexandra was also mentioning, this power of personal connection and transformation. I wanted also to share, and maybe you can kind of set up these clips for us. I have two performances by the children's choir, and maybe one of you can comment on one and the other on another, however you wish. Just maybe you can tell us a little bit about the program that you offer, like the performances and maybe the workshops, and then I will show these two clips right after.
Maybe Alexandra can talk about it.
The structure of the festival also changed a little. I missed the last year's festival, so I will talk about the workshops that were part of the festival when I was there.
Mhm.
The workshops, as Saba said, we cannot provide the entire education that the children missed. And it's really heartbreaking when you realize that there is only so little you can do, but that so little is also huge in the interactions that are happening. So during the workshops, we would get together with children, and the age range is also from 5 or 6 years old, sometimes to 15, 16 years old. They're all in the same group, so it's very difficult to tailor it to one narrow specific age. This is another thing that in the West we do. We compartmentalize by age, there is no luxury to do that over there. So children are together. And Saba started a girls' choir. So one of the workshops, for example, that I did, and we refer to that regarding the sample that we have, he introduced me to the girls, and we were thinking, what is the thing that we can do together? So I wanted them to come with their own to come with the musical material that has to do with their own identity. So Saba worked with them on a lot of songs that are songs from where they come from. So in a way, they were teaching Saba and they were teaching me the music that they know, which also put them in place of authority, the place of power, and also had them connect to their identity and connect us to their identity. And then the next step that I did, because we had really amazing improvisers, everybody who comes to the festival is really a great musician, just being able to connect with others. So I had the ensemble of improvisers, musicians from all over the world, and I asked the girls in the choir to just say their names, just shout their names and words that are important to them in their language. So we had Kurdish, we had Turkish, we had Arabic. Some of them even spoke a few words of English. And the words that they chose were home, happiness, freedom, love, had their own names. And in the rehearsal, and this is also, this connects to what Dr. Alai said at the beginning about girls and women. It's really so difficult for them, especially in those societies. In the rehearsals, girls would just start like whispering their names. And I would say, no, just shout your name. This is your name, shout your name. And little by little, it was beautiful to see how free and how they owned their own names, which in the culture, we don't go around shouting your name. And the way Saba organized the concert, it was outdoors. And in a huge, open, beautiful space by the museum in Mardin. And just to hear those beautiful voices of girls shouting those words that were important to them together with their own personal names that were just floating over the Mesopotamian plain, because the city is really at the edge of on the border of Turkey and Syria. It was one of the most moving moments for me, but the transition from them being shy to those young women who really owned their own presence and their identity on that stage was incredible.
Let's take a look.
Vietnam. واقعا
All right. Yes, Safa, did you want to say something about the second performance, the second clip?
No, so this is a choir that in 2018, I moved there in May. I started actually working. It's in the choir is from this city called Nusaybin, which is actually an ancient city, and two of the old wise men who came to visit baby Jesus, in fact, from there, Nusaybin actually. And it's an old Christian, ancient Christian city, but it's located on the border of Syria. Literally, you can sit in a cafe and watch the Syria on the other side. And it's been the center of conflict and war for so many years. When you enter the city, you can see that all these bullet holes on the buildings, because there's been so much conflict between the Kurdish troops from north of Syria and Turkish government in that area. So children are extremely traumatized and exposed to very violent, unpredictable conditions. And we started, we never meant it to be a women choir, a girls choir, but it's easier for girls to sing actually in a choir. Culturally, it's more accepted. And we had this one or two, boys that they were in a group and they stayed until the end, which was very actually admirable in that culture. And now at the end it increased to 15 people, and now we are actually now they're grown up. A lot of these children grow up, and a couple of them went to university, to different cities. Now we are planning for another choir actually starting it this year. So as Alexandra mentioned, we are involved in a musical process, but at the same time, music here is used for some sort of therapy, for some sort of therapeutic process. So we don't intend to create musicians out of the children. We intend to engage them in a meaningful collaboration with people from outside world. So they can both be on the stage and both be the audience at the same time. And I think that creates the complete experience for Flying Carpet Festival.
You mentioned that some children stay in touch with you afterwards?
A lot of them. I have to. A lot of them. And every artist who comes to the festival, they're being followed by their children, which puts a lot of responsibility on you when you have a group of children, Syrian refugees, or people who come from vulnerable backgrounds. They're following you on social media. I can tell you that totally changed my behavior on social media, because the things that I can show is not that everything anymore. I cannot put a picture of my food on Instagram, reality of it. It's a very simple example, but it is something that you encounter children who are struggling for a piece of bread the entire day. So then you have to always contain yourself. So that's why I thought in the very beginning when I went there, I realized that it's a perfect experience, both for the children, because they're receiving something, they're getting inspired by these people coming from outside, and for the artists who are completely disconnected from reality. And this brings a real cathartic experience. You need to almost two extremes of a spectrum, of emotions. That's why I think it's been going on, and it's going to go on for the next couple of years, and it's very sustainable because there is need on both sides actually, and it's very equal. In fact, I don't want to make one look larger than the other. In fact, we suffer from many issues here in the United States or in any other country in the world, and the children are suffering from very totally different issues. But the outcome is the same. We all need to be loved and to be near the people who love us. And that happens when we look at something beyond ourselves. And that is the way to, in fact, joy, to find something and to be useful where it's not just for yourself, for other people. And that creates love. That sense of small sacrifice that we make here, it creates a sense of love because children are very perceptive. They understand every detail and why we are here and why are we not living in our own comfortable countries and not ever, come to this part of the world. And the fact that we are there, it proves something to them. They're much smarter than us in many ways, So I love this emotional connection and the way we need each other. Every artist that leaves Flying Carpet, they want to come back as soon as possible. And that's not something that I claim. It's something that I myself feel every day, actually, when I'm out of that area. Because in everything, if I just gather a group of people and just perform in Sirkane Center and just send a message to a few people, suddenly 70, 80 people will show up. Average performance that we have in Flying Carpet, something between 300-400 people up to 1,500 children we have audience, which is not common in my performances here in the United States, I can tell you. So yes, that's fine.
And you will be going back there in the fall of this year.
I'm going back there actually in May. Personally, I needed to be around you. When I'm in a workshop with children in a room, and because people who come in the fall, they're mostly involved in performances. And now there's not much time for workshops anymore. We create one unified program and we tour it around the region in 7-8 different locations. But when I go earlier, I'll be able to have consistent classes with children. And I just love that. When I'm in that room, it's the calmest moments of my life, actually. So this is something I emotionally myself need to be there, and I would do anything that I could be useful for.
Yes, thank you both. I will conclude with a little look into the promotional video for this year's festival, and also invite anyone who would like to find out more about the festival and get involved to take a look at the links that are posted in chat. Will be posted in chat, and we will be back for Q&A. I see that we have received some questions, and I also invite you to take a look at Sahba's and Alexandra's websites to explore more of their work there. So let me see if I can share this video to conclude, and then we'll be back for Q&A.
Ori mori
Thank you, Marisa. Thanks so much. So let's turn to some of the questions. I saw that one of them was about ways that people can get involved. So hopefully the website will provide some information, and if there's anything else that we could add to that, let me know. So one of the questions is, do they know how long the refugees will be staying along the border? What will happen to these refugees? Is this a question we can answer? It's one that we've received.
Not really. I mean, right now it's indefinite. Basically, they have so since the refugee crisis, the whole refugee system in the world changed for some specific reason. So the reality of Turkey is Turkey is the kind of a gatehold for refugees, and Europe is basically paying Turkey to keep the refugees in Turkey and stop them from traveling through the Mediterranean Sea and create these catastrophes that we hear about on the news. So that is the function of the government of Turkey. And Turkey has accepted 4 million refugees. They don't have a refugee status because if you grant them the refugee status, they're entitled to certain human rights, actually. And they are considered guests, and that means that they do not have authorization to work or be an active participant in the society. And in fact, with the new plan that Turkey has secured 15 miles into Syria, into north of Syria, and they are building actually complexes to return the refugees to their home. That is the ultimate plan. But the situation is very unknown, and people are kind of stuck in this in between, in this bureaucratic kind of detail. And I don't think it's going to be solved anytime soon. In fact, there are still camps in Syria, the ISIS children, for example, that they are in Raqqa and other parts of Syria, and that they are being kept in the middle of desert because the European countries, they do not want to accept their own citizens because they would be entitled to human rights and legal rights in this. So it's kind of a Guantanamo situation that has been created there in order to just temporarily solve this situation. No one knows what's going to happen in the future.
What kind of work is available for men and women? You mentioned that they don't have permits to work. So how do they survive?
So they survived as, for example, immigrants who are illegal here survive. They can work at a lower rate. Mostly they will be abused because of that. But they have to do like seasonal jobs. Sometimes they have to travel to other parts of Turkey when there's like fruit picking from some garden, and the entire family moves there to just get some work. So work is the main issue actually among the Syrian refugees in southeast of Turkey.
Children also work sometimes just for food. Children that come to the center, sometimes you would see them at the marketplace helping around, and they would be just working to have something to eat.
So we have some thank yous, and one of our viewers was wondering if there's an opportunity to continue art making and appreciating on a more ongoing method. So I suppose you return every year, but throughout the year, or?
There are workshops throughout the year. Now we have mobile units actually that travel to different parts. We have containers that we have an ongoing analog photography class, music class, and circus that is always going on throughout the year. And we accept volunteers also to come in and stay with us, and we have a guest house, and they can stay with us and work with the children if they want. Festival is kind of is an opportunity that you actually bring out the outcome of all these activities. So the earlier we go there, we'll be able to collaborate, stronger collaborations with children. But the activities of this organization for the last 12 years has been ongoing, all throughout the year. So that is an opportunity for anyone to travel and volunteer for this organization.
Alexandra, did you want to add something?
Yes. When Saba mentioned the photography class, there is the Instagram profile of the photography class, which is amazing because children get their own cameras to carry around, and we see pictures from their home and lives that we really never would have access to. So it's one of my favorite Instagram places to go to, just to see amazing photos taken by children, which I can't recall the name at the moment. Maybe Saba can remember.
Do you remember, Saba? Maybe we can share it in chat if you remember
Yes,
it.
Sirkane Dark Room.
The dark room, exactly.
Actually, it's been on the news lately because they recently published a book, actually. And there's been a lot of media coverage. If you just look for this, it will come up. But my friend Sarbaz Saleh himself is from Kobane, which is a city that was surrounded by ISIS for many months, actually. He runs this festival, and he's the director of the festival, doing an incredible job. And the results are magnificent if you see the photography, because he teaches the children how to compose and how to have a proper, and also on the subject and how to create content. And this is the places that we don't have access to, like children's homes and the conditions they're living. And they take very beautiful pictures of their parents, their grandmothers, their grandparents, other children, with very, very creative, in many creative ways that you don't see an adult actually having that sense of innocence actually in the world that I'm telling you about. So definitely check them out. They're incredible.
I'll take one more question because I know we have to wrap this up. So thank you for sharing this incredible celebration of life. One of our viewers is an applied artist and is interested to hear about your experience on all trauma being pre-verbal. Specifically, what role do you see movement playing in the reclaiming of identity and imagination? Is that something you can comment on?
If I understand the question correctly, I think all the trauma is non-verbal, actually. We should talk about it this way. Because the fact is that I just observe my own process, that working with children, I cannot even talk to them about the traumatic events that they have experienced. You cannot even bring that up. You cannot even have a piece of music or anything that there is a sound of explosion inside, or there is something that will trigger the children, actually. So we are actually trying to we know that every child has been struck by the extreme violence and extreme scenes that sometimes you don't want to know actually what this child has made. What matters is the next step. What matters is what are we doing about that? Because I feel that trauma, when we talk about traumatic event, is in fact reality. It's the reality happening, and this child is a witness to reality that is happening around them. And how to absorb that reality and how to transform that into a meaningful expression is the challenge here. Imagine a young child, which most of them are, for example, someone who's a suicide bomber, and majority of them are in fact young children that do that, if you notice. So imagine that being that person, that you're expressing yourself through violence. So I think even terrorism, even attacking other people's violence, is a form of expression. In fact, there is something deep inside that you're bringing out, and it looks like a monster to everyone. How to turn this darkness inside into another process that is meaningful and it is beneficial to the people around you. That is what we are working on, in fact. And it's slimmer than anything. It's so close to each other. Any child that we work with, or Alexandra has met, or any other artist they have met, there is an extreme potential in this child to become a beautiful artist or a beautiful person, no matter what they're doing, or turning into violence and becoming a child soldier, basically. And it's very close to each other. Due to the lack of identity that most children in that area, lack of guidance. And this is something that we can talk about also the young people here in the United States. But the fact is that this is something that young people all around the world are experiencing. And with the emergence of digital social media and all that, it's gotten worse, actually, because now they're looking up to something that in fact does not exist in reality, and getting affected by it, and that creates a lot of imbalance in the coming decade. Actually.
Thank you both so much. We have very appreciative audience, and we are all grateful for the amazing work that you do, and we wish you continued success. Thank you very much. And as for us, we look forward to seeing our audience at our next program. Thank you.
Thank you.